It's time once again for Catalog and Cocktails. It's your honest, no BS, non-salesy conversation about enterprise data management with tasty beverages in hand. I'm Tim Gasper, longtime data nerd, product guy, customer guy at Data.World, joined by co-host Juan Cicada.
Hey,
Juan,
Tim.
where are you?
How are you doing, Tim? I'm Juan Cicada, principal scientist at Data.World, and as always, it's a pleasure. And today I am lucky to be in person with our guest. I'm actually on the other side of the pond. I'm in Amsterdam today, and I'm super excited to be able to chat today with Peter Kromhout and Mariam Halfhide from Xebia that we have been just working. It's just really cool to get so many people like-minded, talk about AI and becoming AI ready, which we're going to chat about. But Peter, Mariam, how are you guys doing?
Doing great. Thanks. Pleasure having you here.
Well, to kick it off, we always do our talent toast. So what are we drinking and what are we toasting for today? Tim, how about you? You
want to start with me? Because mine's going to be the most boring. It's 8 a.m. over here in Austin, Texas, and I've got my delicious home coffee that I make. So what about you guys? You probably have some more interesting things you're drinking.
Coffee for you.
I'm afraid I'm beating you to it with the most boring drink, which mine is just water. Okay, carbohydrated water, but still.
All right. Well, then,
Peter. Well, we have actually a very nice one.
It's a non-alcoholic Belgian beer called Leffe.
I'm happily surprised. I didn't know that they did a non-alcoholic one, and this is actually super tasty.
I like Leffe. I didn't know that they had a non-alcoholic version.
We have lots of non-alcoholic beers nowadays here in the Netherlands that are really good. And I still need to drive, so it's a good thing to have non-alcoholic beers, I would say.
Yeah. Well, and I think let's toast for being here in person. Always, it's just great to go chat and have conversations about AI. So cheers.
Cheers.
You've been missed.
Cheers,
we miss you, Tim.
Yeah.
All right. Let's just kick it off. All right. Honest, no BS. What do we mean by being AI ready? I think it's a phrase, a term people are throwing out there, but what does that mean to you?
To me, it depends a bit what do you want to do with AI, because it's not necessarily the goal on itself. At least I would argue it shouldn't be. It's like a means to an end, and then means to an end. Well, what's your goal as an organization in general? Yeah.
So it's about answering business questions and using AI
to support that.
Yeah, in the traditional sense of AI, so machine learning, optimization models, classification models, but also the new.
Yeah, I think with Gen AI, it could be even more like what would be the purpose? Is it to increase your productivity, or is it to support your mission, or whatever that might be? But it's more about that purpose and AI supporting that purpose as means to an end rather than just by itself.
So I think this is one of the stuff that we need to start becoming a little bit more philosophical, but it's valuable to be philosophical around this stuff because it's like, what is the purpose, right? And one of the things that we're seeing all the time is that with AI, the big values that we're seeing with generative AI, large language models, is productivity, right? So that's a productivity gain. So what does it mean to be AI ready, to be productive versus, I want to be able to go, like, say, answer business questions, right? Mm-hmm. Well, you can see that through a lens of, I'm being more productive because I can answer more questions, but also it could be I'm answering questions I haven't even been able to do before. So maybe in that case, it's like, it's not even just, it's a type of productivity, but it's like I'm opening new opportunities that have never been exposed, all the way to like new revenue opportunities we've doing. So I think so given these different types of ways of viewing what AI can be used, how would we then actually kind of get more tactical, more specific? What does it mean to be AI ready then?
Yeah, so what I think is that, and we're seeing that as a movement here, is that we recognize that the garbage in, garbage out still holds true today, right? So if we, in the traditional sense of AI, have machine learning models or that kind of models, and we just feed it data that is of low quality, it's going to give you output that is of low quality. And that means you cannot properly answer these business questions, whatever driver behind it. So we're seeing that as a movement here, that there's more attention to make sure that whatever goes in is of high quality and is usable so that the output of your AI is good. And I do think that would also be applicable to the Gen AI phase that we're now in, of course. You'll probably have the same there, which is a little bit different with hallucinations and all, but still you need to have your foundations in order to have your AI working properly.
So this starts to get into like, what does it mean to like, what are the activities that you need to do in order to become AI ready? So it sounds like having, that good foundation around data quality, data management ends up being one really key thing.
Yeah, and that's maybe more of even on the, let's say, actual indeed execution side of things, that you need to have a good foundation. But it starts, of course, with strategy. Sometimes, we struggle even there. But essentially, and I would say also having a set of use cases that are clearly scoped, it's a good place to start.
So it's interesting how we now see these two paths around it. One, we can talk about, frankly, the technical side, right? It's like, okay, you need a foundations, you need to have the data quality to avoid garbage in, garbage out. And the second one is going to be around on the strategy, on the use cases. I think the purpose will be associated to that. So let's kind of dive more into that. I mean, you want to take it first with like on the strategy side? What do we need to be AI ready from a strategy perspective?
I think first of all, it's good to know, what do you want as an organization? Where do you want to be? I mean, essentially, it boils down to where do you want to be, where are you at now, and how do you come from point A to point B, right? But these get quite philosophical as well. It's a bit more high level. So what do you want to be? What do you desire as an organization? Can have so many ways, and to make it more concrete. And then how can analytics, data, AI, all of the above help you with that?
So from your opinion, right, do you see that a lot of the companies that we help, do they have a clear strategic vision on these things, or is there a lot to gain there still?
I mean, I develop data strategies, so usually when company approach me, they don't have a clear strategic vision in terms of data, but they might have like a business strategy, and then it's our job to kind of link one into another, so that the business strategy is actually supported by the data strategy.
So we're hearing data strategy and now AI strategies. Mm-hmm. So, and then you have your business strategy. Like, how are all these things related? I'd love to go. Can you give like some hypothetical, some example?
I think the data strategy or AI strategy a bit dependent on the maturity of the organization. Indeed, does it have the foundation to actually start doing things with AI? Then it's most probably AI strategy. If they still need to work on that foundation, including data management, then it's still a data strategy.
Yeah. And so from the that's on the strategy side. We'll get back to it more now. From the foundational technical side, how is this going to be? Yeah. Let's unpack that more, and then I want to connect these two things to the strategy.
Yeah. So where do we start? Where do you want to start?
I don't know.
That's a big topic, right? So getting your foundations right starts with, okay, so we want to do something with data management, right? So we're trying to answer a business question, and instead of just flying in and trying to get the data and build a report or build a model, we take a step back and think about what do we need to have in place to do that correctly. And then a lot of these kind of data management concepts come in, like, what source am I using for it? Is this the correct source? Am I getting the data there correctly? What does the data mean that we're fetching? What data is being created in a real world situation. How does that translate to data that's being stored in the database somewhere? And how do we capture that relationship? What do we do with data quality and how to deal with bad quality? All these things that you should incorporate in the way that you're answering that business question is going to help you build that foundation. Well, how do you approach that? Is that a bottom-up thing? Is that a top-down thing? I've seen both approaches in different organizations, and well, some aspects of them are successful and some aspects of them are clearly not. But I think that's what you want to do to get the foundation.
Do you find that companies often have that foundation that they need in order to start tackling these AI, initiatives and questions, or would you say by and large that it's missing?
I would say by and large that it is missing, and I think a big part of that is, and it might be, well, I think a big part of it is that we have moved into a new paradigm, like 5, 7, 8 years ago, where we said we're going to stop doing traditional data warehousing. We're going to do data lakes, ELT. We're not doing ETL, we do ELT. And I think with that paradigm shift, we've lost a lot of structure and kind of, well, foundational knowledge that we used to capture in this old paradigm, and we don't have that anymore. And I think a lot of companies are now running into the fact that they have a beautiful data lake. They've sunken a lot of millions of euros or dollars into that, and it's still not answering the business questions that they want to have answered. And I'm not advocating that we go back to on-premise ETL like in the old days, but I am advocating that we bring some of that structure and way of working back into the modern time that we are in.
Yeah, I know some people talk about the lake house, right? And maybe we have a beautiful lake, but we haven't done enough to build the house yet.
Yeah.
So I'm speechless over these things. You said it yourself. It's like we're doing this stuff over and over again, right? And changing the technologies. So it seems like it's just we lack completely of the strategy. I mean, we love to go throw technology at the problem, right?
Yeah.
I think but why is it that we are like so much struggling then on the strategy? Like, because I mean, if you did have a strong strategy around all this stuff, you wouldn't be kind of doing it over and over again and then kind of repeating and reinventing the wheel. Like, why is this?
Why the strategy is absolutely needed, you mean?
No, why is it? I mean, why aren't we actually using, like, we don't have a strategy defined.
Why are we so bad at this?
Yeah, why do we suck at this, basically? To be very, very blunt and honest here, like, we suck. We are doing this, keep solving this problem, quote unquote, solving this problem over and over again, and it's still not solvable. Yeah. And why is it? And it seems to me like we have no strategy then. Like, I mean, the strategy is what? Throw more technology? Like, that's not it. Like,
that's not gonna.
Well, that kind of seems to be the strategy that has been working. I don't know.
It feels like a bit. It boils down to asking the tough questions that requires to be honest with yourself, because you get all of these questions, and the same goes with ethics and anything, and you feel like maybe not now. I just want to use the tech. It's I don't want to think about it too much right now, and then you forget that it's gonna come and bite you. Yeah. Back. That's
kind can't take shortcuts.
Yeah.
No, but I think so. Shortcuts is a thing here, right? And I think it's a people problem. Sorry, people, that I'm not here to offend you, but it's not a technology problem. It's a people problem, right? It's data analysts, data engineers, data scientists needing to solve a business question, but not stepping over the boundaries and not getting the support from business people, from SMEs, to really understand what is the business problem, why am I using this data element, is this really answering your question? It's about people that need to collaborate, that need to work together, but that are in different domains in an organization, that are in different silos in organizations. And those bridges, it's difficult for people to cross those bridges. It's much more easy to be in your daily meeting and say, well, I'm going to code this, I'm going to code that, I'm going to deploy it hopefully today or end of the week, and then just hope that it answers the question. So I think that is a large part of the problem.
So how do we build these bridges?
Well, it helps when you have people that can communicate on both sides of the equation. Maybe with the trickle down IT, data, and business, of course. Yeah. Those are quite scarce. But that definitely helps. And sometimes a business person that is more savvy and interested in the tech, or the other way around, those people really drive the collaboration in that sense. But you still, at the end of the day, you're still dealing with people, and it's still also part of the culture. And if it's not carried by upper management as well as by example, then it will also not land at the end of the day. So it's not only top down and it's not only bottom up. Of course, dependent on the organization, but you kind of need both to meet in the middle.
So, but you say that we need people who are very scarce, who are able to kind of cross the bridges, communicate. So, are we then just doomed because there's not enough of these people? I mean, shouldn't part of the strategy here then be that we need to start investing in actually educating our workforce, our organizations? Like we need to start investing in people who can be these bridges, right? I mean, either within your organization. How about we need more boot camps on not just coding boot camps, but
Well,
people boot camps, or I mean, honestly, because is what are we going to do then? Because
think that's
in
part of
5
it,
years,
right?
10 years from now, we're having another technology paradigm shift, which we all are already in one, right? So
Yeah.
then in another 5-10 years, we're going to have the exact same conversation.
Well, it would be nice to have you here in Amsterdam again, or maybe I will join you in Texas. Now, so the theme of today is walking, crawling, walking, running, right? And it's like in real life when you have a kid, you need to teach them to start walking. That you do that by holding their hand in the beginning and by doing it together, right? So I think. So I've seen different approaches, bottom up, top down. What I've seen work is really a use case driven approach. So not trying to cover the entire scope of your organization and be compliant everywhere and do data governance or data management everywhere, but start with a couple of use cases and do those use cases in a collaborative manner. So make sure that you bring the different teams, the different participants from business, data, and IT together and collaborate on that use case. And do it in such a way that you capture all that information and capture all that knowledge, such as the meanings, the relationships, the semantics, the quality expectations, etc. And that will help you in the output of your use case. And it will build that kind of, I'm now learning how to walk, I'm now learning how to do data management together in a collaborative way. And from there, you can scale it further. I think that's important.
On top of the use case driven approach, actually what we see as part of the use case driven approach is also the fact that this use case is aligned with the actual strategy and can generate measurable value, so that you actually have the buy-in from the top in that sense, so that it's not just a bottom-up use case that somebody's just this needs to be connected in a line, and then you can also measure things like governance. You know how it was before, you implement the use case, you implement the governance around it, and then you can also measure it, what it generates after.
Yeah, it needs to be something that that matters to the organization, but then connecting it to what you said, Peter, it still needs to be focused. You can't boil the ocean all at once, right? So can either of you give an example of where you think, whether it's one of your clients or just something you've seen in the industry, where you think that this has gone well, like where they were able to successfully do this sort of crawl, walk, run, and what did that look like?
I always like how Tim brings up like more on the positive side. I'm always like, we're doomed, like we're screwed. 5 years. And like, no, this can't be the case. You have to have successful. Or thank you, Tim, for
no worries. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so from a personal experience, right? I've just finished a project with an airliner, and you've been involved in that sense there also, of course. And I think we've done that very successfully there. We were missing a little bit of the bottom-up support, but we took this use case-driven approach. We partnered with a very important strategic program for this organization, right? So they said, well, we have a strategic program. There are a bunch of data use cases in that program. These are important for our future. And we do believe that we want to do data management properly for those use cases. So we will commit to, every use case that we do that's data related, we are going to follow this data management framework that we have, and we're going to do it properly. That is kind of important because you need that support, because it's going to take a little bit longer. Let's be honest. You can cut less corners. You need to do a bit more work to do it properly. And there's always business pressure, right? To get those models out there, to get those reports out there. But if you have this support, you have the wiggle room to take a little bit more time and do it of higher quality.
So how do folks like that realize, we need to follow, you said, like these data management frameworks, like they've come to how did they come to the realization that it was valuable and necessary to invest more into this proper kind of data management foundations? As you said, like gives you wiggle room to be, okay, I'm going to take a little bit longer than you would expect because foundations are not as immediate. How did they?
Oftentimes in our cases, they already approach us because they've been trying it without, and they've seen that it doesn't work, and then now maybe we should try something else. but curious to hear.
Sometimes you need to fail first.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe a fun anecdote. One of the things we did is so you probably know Dama, or the big book that's kind of the standard for data management.
The data Bible, right?
The one, yeah. So to create this kind of awareness that people were not that mature, I summarized this book in like 10 questions, and I said, if you as an organization are able to answer these 10 questions, then you're doing data management well. It's like, I can share those 10 questions. No
can
problem.
You do it now?
It starts with, what data do you have? What does it mean? Who owns it? Can I use it? Who is using it? Is there PII data in there? I think that's 6 out of 10, and the others.
You're taking the notes here too.
Yeah.
Good. What data do you
I'll
have?
always get a few in here, but yeah, these are good.
But this is not even the fun part of the anecdote. So I summarized the book in these 10 questions, and then I had this kind of all staff meeting, and I asked everybody to stand up, the entire audience, like 100 and plus people, and I said, I'm going to ask you these 10 questions, and if your answer is yes, you're allowed to keep standing. If your answer is no, you need to sit down. It took me like 4 questions, and then only one person was still standing. The 4th of the 10 questions. And that kind of, then everybody felt like, we need to do something because we're not there yet. So this was one of the things that we did to create awareness.
This is a fantastic example. I have never heard this before, something like this.
Yeah. I like that you're actually simplifying it too, because the Dama book is pretty it's pretty intense reading. And if we can boil it down to 10 tenets of good well-managed data, then that's a lot better.
I'm already imagining. Okay, I'm gonna use this approach. Yeah, and it's the whole thing. Is like I like how like everybody stand up, right, and you sit down, and then people realize like, oh shit.
Yeah, and you feel it here.
Yeah, and then you're like, this is not good, right? Curious. So in this particular example, like the folks in the audience, what were the backgrounds? Were they technical or the business?
Yeah, this was more on the IT side of the organization. Yeah, so this wasn't business. So
what if the business, like if you would have asked those questions to the business side, like, or what are the 10 questions that you'd ask with respect to like strategy?
You'll ask them, what data do you have? And then they all sit down, right?
Yeah.
I think this is also a bit of a problem in the sense that data management is such a broad topic, especially for IDAMA. There's so many aspects of it that everybody refers to maybe slightly a different thing when they name data management. So it's first also like having this common understanding. Do we mean the same thing when we say data management or data governance? Because sometimes it means something else for everyone else to say, whether it's business or IT for sure.
Yeah, and I would say towards the business, I've used storytelling a lot. It's about perception, right? So in my first phase there, I came across a couple of situations where I could clearly see that lacking data management led to problems, right? So dashboards breaking, models breaking because of certain upstream choices that were made in the past. And if you can kind of simplify, this is what happened to your dashboard, which is critical for you, but the causes are this and this and this, and that means you lacked on data management, that's making it more tangible. That helped a lot also to get by.
It reminds me, Tim, of the episode we had on data storytelling with Kat, I forget her last name, going through the and, but, therefore, right? So it's like, and this has happened, and, but, and then at the end, like, we have to do something, therefore we need to go do this. So like, that's the
structure of the story.
The story you should be telling.
Yeah.
And I think that
I also think of our episode with Rupal that we had a while ago, where we talked a lot about the importance of examples and anecdotes.
Yeah.
I think this example anecdotes is really critical, and I think people they live through these issues, and then they realize, okay, I don't want to go through it again, and then it just you have all this PTSD of all this other stuff not going well when they go fix it, right? Okay, so then. Tying the foundations back to the strategy. I'm just looking I'm going back to I'm already imagining, right? All these people sitting down or standing up, sitting down. Do they understand what is the strategy, or how are they connecting then that the reason why they're sitting down is a problem and how that's going to affect the larger strategy? Like, how do we connect these two dots? Because I feel that we have over time, it's like, again, the bridges are not built between the foundations of data and then the strategy. Like,
yeah. So I think the connection is we understand now that we are in a need to be better at this. And then we chose strategic program with important use cases that will help the organization achieve their strategic goals. Then let's come in with a approach where we execute in those use cases, and we help them to actually go from crawling to walking. We show them, okay, so if you want to do this properly, this is our framework. We're going to help you do the data modeling. We're going to help you do the data classification, tie the conceptual to the technical data, get the metadata up and running, right? So it's really holding their hands, executing these strategic use cases, and in that sense, maturing also the people that are part of it. And whilst you're doing that, you don't only do that with the analyst or the scientist, but you do that with the business SME, with the IT person, with the data engineer and data scientist together in a room, workshop-wise. And that's the way that you create these bridges, because people are forced to sit together and talk to each other and express expectations and get assumptions out of the way. That's what happens when you put people in a room together and workshop on these topics.
And so I think one of the things that we also do is like use case ideation and refinement and validation. And in that process, we gather a lot of use cases, really let your creative imagination go. But then how do you select the right ones?
Mm-hmm.
And that process of actually selecting the use cases that directly, visibly support your strategy, that is the main link, I would say. Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's like this is a people problem too, right? I mean, we've been starting as a people problem, and then we need to get people together. We can get them in the same room, and let's stand up, sit down, all this stuff, and then set ideas. And then you'll realize if we start prioritizing, like, oh, I didn't know that was a priority for you. Tell me more, explain me more of that stuff, right? And it goes back to like the storytelling too, which is all very important.
Yeah.
That's indeed like the core of my work. If you ask me what I do, then I would say usually I gather people in a room that have different, find different things important, and then make sure that they have at least some type of shared vision together. That would be the core of my work. Yeah.
So then, okay, looks like we started this whole conversation about how to be AI. What does it mean to be AI ready? And it's kind of boiled down to you really need to be data ready.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's jump ahead. Let's just say folks are data ready. Let's say people do have a strong data foundation. They have in their foundation, they have a strategy. Their data foundations are connected to the data strategy, to the business strategy. So now we have that.
Mm-hmm.
What's missing to get from there to be AI ready then?
I think it's also this how do you call it? Like this. It's a bit of a shift in paradigm, right? Because AI, it's a whole different thing if you consider generative AI.
Well, I think that's the other thing. So we got to be. People are throwing the word AI all over the place when it means so many different things.
Because you mentioned productivity, but it's not only productivity. It's also like this step-by-step tutoring in your pocket that everybody has access to. Like I believe someone called it like proliferation. So that will have a completely different effect.
Maybe we should split the two, right? So first, let's talk about traditional AI ready, and then we can go into the Gen AI ready.
And I think this is important. I mean, I think we're all hesitating ourselves here too. Because I'm thinking about this question too, and I'm like, okay, well, we're live brainstorming here too, right? It's like, how do we? And part of it is to figure out, like, okay, you have the traditional AI, or not even just like the machine learning AI approach. Right? Now we have the generative AI.
Can we actually unpack that a little bit? What like when you guys think about traditional AI versus Gen AI, what are the differences? What do you think about those two being different?
I think they're very different, right? So traditional AI, building machine learning models has been around for quite a long time, and that is making sure that patterns are visible in the data and that you leverage those patterns to come to some kind of optimization or prediction. That is something that is different than the Gen AI, where we really
generate new content.
Yeah, where it says it, right? It's generative. It's much more black box. We don't know exactly what's going on. We all know about the hallucination. So that's a very different area of AI, I would say, or at least it requires something different from your data.
And then
And also from your people.
Yeah.
okay, yeah. So let's break this down even further, right? From the people, process, technology side, right? I mean, you need different technology for these different things, right? But then also the people on the people and process side. Yes. Also, yeah. Let's break that down.
Yeah. So let's start with machine learning and what does it mean then to be ready, right? I think if we've crossed this step that we talked about earlier, right? Having your foundations in place, making sure that you do your data management properly, then your machine learning project will go off much easier and quicker. You will be able to leverage, we know which data we have, we know what the semantics are behind it, we know how to interpret all these different elements. We are trusting that it comes from the correct sources. If we don't know exactly what things mean, or we need to interpret something and it's not there, we know who to talk to because we have captured all that information, right? So it will help you speed up this machine learning use case tremendously. It will help you be able to, well, you often need to develop features, right, in your machine learning model. Make it much easier to develop your features, especially if you have captured KPIs and how to calculate those, right? So I think that is what it means being AI ready from a data perspective for
the machine learning case.
For the machine learning case.
And then for the generative AI.
Yeah, for the generative AI.
I mean, the same thing should apply too, right?
Yeah, it's like on top of that, additional things apply, I would say, right?
Well, I think one of the very interesting promises here is that we can kind of stop doing self-service analytics maybe in the future and really provide end users on the business, which is a different audience, where what you just mentioned, right? It's a different audience. We can provide them maybe with an interface that they can ask questions and they will get proper answers instead of having to go to a data team to build a report or a dashboard, right? I think we can kind of work differently in our industry. That is the promise of Gen AI on top of data.
But then, but I still think that I acknowledge that there are these two different things and we need to separate them. But I do wonder if it's like each one will have different types of foundations. And I'm like, well, I think once you at the end, all these foundations are
building on top of
they're building on top of each other, right?
Yeah,
I don't think there's like, well, you need this specific foundation for the machine learning one. I think they're all. I mean, the other topic is like explainability, and it comes into the part of ethics, and like you need that for all of this type of AI, right?
Yes,
it's not just for one or the other.
True, but it's much more apparent with Gen AI because it shows,
Okay,
when it goes rogue, so to say, it shows a bit, the implications of it are clearly shown, but it holds for other, traditional ways as well.
And stuff, right?
Yeah, but why I'm saying this, because for years I've been advocating for ethics and responsible use, but nobody would ever listen. Nobody cared until Gen AI came along, and all of a sudden the momentum is there, and everybody, so that's why. Still some shifts that all of a sudden
these technology paradigm shifts actually help to I've been saying this for so long, and finally people are paying attention.
No, that's so true, actually. Yeah.
The same thing for me. I've been talking about knowledge graph for so long, and it's like, yes, this Gen AI, this LLMs are finally doing it. I think the same thing for the ethics.
Potential of also negative implications and misuse, as well as the potential for the positive implications. I mean, it's a two-sided coin, right, or double-edged sword, however you want to call it. So.
Yeah.
Very
just
relevant.
unpack one thing, I think it was you, Peter, that mentioned, you're creating these experiences and applications that people can use, right, with generative AI, and that makes me think that we're pushing data people to be a little uncomfortable and pushing them into a new arena, because when you're just making machine learning models to optimize a particular, pricing scheme or a business process, even though you need business understanding, the product often is just the model, right?
Yeah.
But in the case of generative AI now, you're actually having to worry about how the business user is going to interact and what the user experience is. And it's almost forcing data people to become more like product people. And I'm curious if that's a problem that you know, Miriam and you and Peter are saying, or if that changes, you know, part of what it means to become AI ready.
It could be in a sense like I've heard someone mention this example, like when you're in a shop and you have your I don't know, your child with you, and if you break something in a shop, then you break it, you buy it. And it's in a similar sense, maybe if, you know, Gen AI is used by someone to break something, then maybe, I don't know, the accountability should be at the vendor side who's making that. And is that the sense of the product you mean? Like you break it, you buy it, or
I think more from the perspective of you know, data people having to take new things into account, because now it's you can't just create you know, a model and work with the data. You actually have to think about how end users are going to use it, because there's an actual user experience involved.
Well, and I think part of that user experience is like this issue, like you just mentioned, accountability. Like maybe that's something that if that's a foundation, and the data foundation is like, now you got more pressure, because like now all the stuff that you're doing is being used for these other things. So where does that accountability go down? And it's like, what the found you can make an argument go like the building, like when something happened to the building, it's it wasn't the wall. I mean, it wasn't the wall. It's like the foundation at the end, right?
Okay, yeah, because
I mean,
this
that's
is, you can use that same product with a very different intention. So you don't know what type of intention the user has. You mean that?
Yeah, I mean that opens up an interesting question too, right? Because you're like, well, you have like so much responsibility, saying I want this data to have strong foundations because it's going to be used for this ML, this AI, and this AI, this AI, and then you're like, I don't even know what you're going to use it for, and I even know what the use cases are. So this was built for some intention, and later on you're going to go do it for something else, and maybe it does work, but we didn't think about this other ethics part that we didn't know. So at the end of the day, like you could argue that there's more and more pressure going to go on top of these foundations. So is it
probably because the output is much more visual, and if it goes wrong, the impact is bigger, right? Or well, maybe not the impact is bigger. I think machine learning models going rogue can have a very big impact also. But often, coming back to what you were saying, Tim, it's kind of more an internal product, right? So there's a small user group internally. In a best case scenario, they use it automatically in some kind of business process, but in many scenarios, it goes to a person that does a sanity check before using the output of a model for decision making, right? In other cases, it goes to your website and it automatically does it, but that's not always the case. Many organizations are still in the stage where they say, well, give me the output of a machine learning model, I'll do a sanity check, and then I'll use it in my decision making. And then the potential impact is much lower, and you have a sanity check. Whilst if you go into this new Gen AI thing and it directly hits an end user, you have a bigger responsibility to bear there.
And especially because the end user usually is not as literate as the end user of an ML model in general. And then there's also, like, for example, transparency, right? There's an additional layer added. Like with traditional models, you just have transparency that can be on the different layers and levels, right? The transparency on outcome, on the data itself, or on the model. But now you also have a part like, am I also transparent about the generated content that I use, for example, or not? Like there's another layer because, you can actually, copy paste something and reuse it.
My brain's now started I mean,
it's a big topic.
Now I'm realizing that when we talk about foundations, we all started about kind of getting into foundations, and I'm like, wow, these foundations are getting more and more complicated. And then it's like, it's not. I mean, you want to have like these strong pillars, but then you're like, well, I need to pack this thing to this thing, so now it's like, then we need more pillars, or is that pillar need to get bigger? And I'm like, well, I think the principles are getting more complicated here.
It's becoming harder to control all the variables, right? Like I think we've, as data people, we've had more ability to compartmentalized. Like even in this data lake world, right? We've been able to say, oh, well, all the bad stuff is in raw and silver, right? And like, oh, the good stuff we're going to put in platinum, right? Okay, well, at least we're going to choose our zone and we're going to try to control it. But I think with generative AI, now those boundaries are starting to become more fluid, and it's becoming a lot harder to predict. To your point, Mariam, like around the accountability, how it's going to be used, and sort of we're entering a brave new world.
And we should avoid that this accountability comes back to the data engineers or the data team again, right? We've seen that with the data lake approach, that they become the man in the middle and suddenly they are the ones to blame, whilst maybe things go very wrong in this upstream situation. We should avoid that this happens again, and that, again, the data people are the ones to blame when things go wrong with LLMs, etc.
So what do we do then?
Yeah,
I believe, honestly, that there is just, like I mentioned right before, there is this race ongoing of deploying the latest capabilities as fast as possible in order to keep up with the race. The race of, if I don't do it, then somebody else will, and I won't have a say in the future. I understand where that race is coming from, but there are incentives that are governing the dynamic of how companies deploy AI that might not necessarily match public interest in that sense. And it's a difficult topic on its own.
Yeah, oh man, we should have another podcast episode just on like incentives on managing.
Yeah, there's a whole world on that, but to me, oftentimes it boils down. There's not always, good or right or wrong in this case. Sometimes it's a lot of gray areas and things are not defined yet. And for me, it's good enough if you just say that you actually made a conscious choice, that you actually thought about it. Just that by itself, like at least creating some awareness where to start. Because everybody has a different set of norms and values at the end anyway.
Well, I knew this was going to go by so quickly. 30 minutes, 40 minutes. I still told you, right? And we just got into like the next topic or the next hour, so we'll do that. All right, let's kick it off with our lightning round questions. I'll kick it off. Number one, do most companies realize they need to become AI ready, or they don't even realize it yet?
I think a lot of people still think this Gen AI thing is a magical solution, and we don't need to invest or we don't need to do the legwork to reap the benefits. And I think it's up to us to educate these companies. You need to do the legwork.
Yeah, I think most of them do not realize what's actually behind it and what's needed for it to actually.
So you can now send this podcast to those folks.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
They just want to harvest,
If there's one key takeaway, do the legwork. Otherwise, it's gonna fail.
Do the work.
Yeah. All right, you go, Tim.
All right, second question: should data strategy and AI strategy be combined?
If that's relevant, but usually. It can be both. I wouldn't say it should be combined. It depends a bit on what your goal is. No, not necessarily.
Okay, it depends on your goal, but not necessarily.
They don't necessarily need to be combined, but they do need to be aligned. Yeah.
Yeah, another takeaway for me is like, whenever we're discussing these things, like, what is a purpose, right? Let's make sure we go back to like, I don't know what the purpose is. If we don't know why the heck we're here, what's the purpose, then we should sit down and figure that one out. All right. All right. Next question. Is there AI low-hanging fruit that doesn't require you to have a data foundation yet?
That is a good question that you come up with.
I'm going to bring the ethics topic in general, because ethics by itself does not maybe necessarily require the data foundation right away, but creating, identifying your organizational ethical compass is already helping to know what your, value is as an organization, and whether or not certain, let's say choice that may have ethical implications desirable for you as an organization or not. That's more like a prep work in a sense. Yeah.
Well, an additional benefit to this is that you start that collaboration, right? You start bridging those silos.
And it's on a less technical level, so everybody, can get philosophical on that.
All right, Tim, take us away. Final question.
All right, final question. Are ethics and responsibility a mandatory part of data and AI strategy?
Well, you're asking someone who's advocating for it. I wouldn't say like it's mandatory part, but I would really advocate for it in the sense that, like I said, like making the conscious choice. I would say it is mandatory to actually sit down and think about that, whether or not you decide to go a route without ethics. Okay, you know, that may be your own, moral compass in a way. Yeah, but you know, at
That's
least
an
you're
honest
making an aware choice.
An
you know?
honest, no BS position right
Yeah.
there.
But maybe it is mandatory because we're getting the EU AI Act, right? So we have the European AI Act in a kind of a draft
For
state.
Europeans, yeah.
And that kind of enforces organizations to think about how to use and deploy AI. So you need to think about the ethics also there.
Like
That's true.
from a personal point of view, I would even say, yeah, don't do it because you have to do it because of the AI Act, but do it because it's the right thing to do, right? I really feel like we can wait for the government. It's going to take a long. AI Act, the first proposal came out in 2021, and it's still not accepted yet. So God knows when it will. And in the meanwhile, we got Gen AI and all that. So I really feel that as professionals in the industry, we carry that responsibility to kind of help, like interaction between AI and ethics is a two-way street in the sense that, like, how is this going to evolve? We have a say in it, actually.
Yeah, so I think we're time to go to takeaways, but no. This is like, for me, my high-level takeaway is, one, yes, do the legwork foundation. Second, remember what is your purpose, and third is what's your moral compass. You should figure that out.
I think that's fair. And the regulatory comment, I think, is an important one because there's what's ethical and there's what's legal, and sometimes what's legal can help people to do what's ethical.
But those are not necessarily the same. It's true.
Yeah.
And there's also like, ethics is a product of society. It can be seen as a product of society, and technology changes the society. And right now we're trying to fit everything in the current frameworks that we have, but ethics will be changed through technology as well. And we can kind of shape this. We have that influence as professionals.
We can shape it, and there's a feedback loop.
Yes, and I believe we should, but...
All right, this is another podcast we need to go do. All right, kick us off. Take us away with takeaways.
All right. So we started off with, what does it mean, honest no BS, to be AI ready? And you both really mentioned, and especially you, Mariam, around it depends on what you want to accomplish, right? That it is a means to an end. And it all goes back to, what's the goal of your organization? What are the business questions and use cases that you have? What are the metrics that you're trying to drive? Is it to increase productivity? Is it to increase efficiency? Is it to support your mission as an organization, right? So it really all does kind of start with, so if you want to become AI ready, you got to have the strategy. You have to have an underlying strategy. And if you haven't defined your business strategy, it's going to be really hard to then define your data strategy because you'll be doing it in a vacuum. You need to define your use cases around your strategy. What do you want to be as an organization? Where are you going? How do you want to get there? You need to connect your data strategy to that business strategy. You have to ask tough questions, and you can't take shortcuts. You have to collaborate. This is a people problem, not a technology problem. You have to build those bridges and you have to cross them. You can't just code the thing and hope it will solve the problem. Garbage in and garbage out also is very much the issue. And generative AI and AI in general, as it continues to become more predominant, is going to exacerbate that and make that problem even more exposed, even worse. You need the foundation, data quality, data management. What source am I using? Is it the correct source? What does the data mean? How does the real life situation map to the data that we have? What is good quality? What is bad quality, right? So these are all really important foundations that we need to have the right people, process, technology, and strategy to address. And we talked about, how do you build those bridges? Well, scarce people and resources that can cross the bridge. How do we develop more of them? How do we cultivate and empower more of them? There's a crawl, walk, run. Peter, you mentioned you got to think about kids, right? You start by holding their hand. And so how do we handhold and go across this bridge here and get people used to it, doing it more often? Use case driven approach, very important. Bring IT, data, analytics, and business all together. Learn how to do data management in a collaborative way around use cases tied to the strategy so you get that buy-in. Juan, what about you? What were your big takeaways?
So what I like is the takeaways I have here is, how to actually take all this in practice and like implement it. And to go through an example of when folks you were working with an airline, right? These are is an organization where they've already partnered with a strategic program, right? They already have these data use cases. They've already realized they know what's important for their future, and they've come to the realization themselves that data management is important to have these strong foundations. Why? Because they've tried to go do this without foundations and they failed, right? I think that's an important thing. Sometimes when you fail, you learn that you need to do it differently. And you need to have these strong foundations. And when you acknowledge that you need to have these foundations, you actually have the wiggle room to actually spend more time doing that, because if you didn't, people are expecting things now. One of the things Peter was talking about, he has the Bible, the Dhamma big book of data, summarize it in 10 questions. Wait, what data do you have? What does it mean? Who owns it? Does it have PII? So forth. And I love that whole anecdote of like, ask people these questions, they all stand up, and if they can say no, then they start sitting down, and suddenly people realize we don't have this foundation. We gotta have to use storytelling, give examples and anecdotes, and connect it to like situations where you've actually had issues before, that people can feel that pain. And just, again, this is a people problem, so we need to get people in the room together. I mean, do use case ideations, and then do the select priorities. And I mean, having that conversation right there is how people start realizing it. Then now let's assume we already have this strong data foundation. What does it mean to get from data ready to AI ready? We had this discussion about separating two types of AI, right? You're building your traditional AI and building ML models, and then now the generative AI. And I think the foundations for both of these things, one of the stuff that comes up is that you have accountability, impacts, positives and negatives, and all these exacerbate, and data teams are always at the center. This is something that we need to figure out, make sure it's not an issue over and over again. But there needs to be some shared accountability. And we're kind of like in the middle of this race, and sometimes we move so fast, and we really need to kind of sit down and understand what are the best interests for the broader stakeholders, and at the end for everybody around it. That was a lot. How did we do? What did we miss?
Oh, there's lots to talk about, but this was a great, I think we had a great conversation.
Well, let's throw it back to you all to wrap us up. So 3 questions. What's your advice? Who should we invite next? And what resources do you follow?
My advice would be step over your boundaries and collaborate with other people, because I think that's where really the understanding and the knowledge is. So don't stay in your silo.
My advice would be, don't be afraid to ask the tough questions and just be honest with yourself. Yeah.
Ask tough questions and honest, no BS.
Yeah.
Who should we invite next?
Who should we invite next?
Yes, to our podcast. Who should we?
Oh, I need to think about that.
All right, you can.
Well, there's this very interesting idea going on about doing less distributed. So this idea of we all need big distributed systems because we have this petabytes of data. A lot of companies actually don't. So we're seeing here a bit of a momentum around less distributed, going like the DuckDB route. Talk about that next. That's interesting.
Yeah, we should probably have somebody from DuckDB.
And there are challenges to tie it into data management, but that's up to you.
Are we okay? Things like DuckDB and strong data foundations. I was like, oh, that's a good one. All right. Finally, what resources do you follow?
LinkedIn has kind of become my Instagram. I'm sometimes scrolling through it, which is ridiculous, of course, but it is. And sometimes you find very interesting articles and that link you into more and more information. So nowadays it's often a starting point for me to find more interesting stuff.
LinkedIn's your new Instagram.
Yeah.
How about you?
On top of that, I closely follow Center for Humane Technology.
Center for Humane Technology.
Humanetech.com. I think it's
Nice.
really good content there. Yeah.
All right, with that, thank you all very much. We appreciate it, and have a great rest of your day. Thank
Thanks,
you, sir.
everyone. Glad to have you all.
All right. Bye-bye.